Hello, fellow language secret agent. Welcome to our explorations of the exciting world of sociolinguistics. I'm Adin, your first guide on this adventure where we uncover the secrets of language in society. Now, let's look at our first clue. What is sociolinguistics? Sociolinguistics is the study of how language works in society. It looks at how things like class, gender, age, and ethnicity affect how we speak. Think of it as a secret agent examining language not just as words, but as something that changes based on social situations. In simple terms, sociolinguistics helps us understand why people talk differently in various situations and how these differences show their identities and social connections. Just like clues at a crime scene can lead us to answers. Understanding this language differences can give us important insight into our communities. And stay tuned as we continue our investigation into the fascinating world of sociolinguistics. Together, we'll discover more about how language shapes our life and communities. Let's solve this mystery.
After you learn about the definition of sociolinguistic with my friend Adin, you're gonna learn about the language variations with me. So, you ready or not? But even if you're not ready, I'm still gonna continue to explain this whole language variation thing. So, let's start from now on. Let's talk about the role of language variations in sociolinguistic first. Language variations play important roles in sociolinguistic because it explores how language differs across regions, social groups, and contexts. These variations include pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, and style, which are influenced by participant, setting, purpose, and topic. But it is also related to multilingualism, such as code switching, diglossia, and don't forget the social factors. But seriously, what are actually language variation though? Language variation is actually all about how people use language differently depending on who they're talking to, where they are, and what's going on. It's like what you might speak one way with your friends and another way with your boss, your client, your colleagues, etc. Things like accents, word choices, and even how formal or casual you sound can change based on your region, social background, or situation. And in places like Indonesia, this is unsurprisingly very common with people mixing languages or switching between formal or informal styles depending on who they're with. As I've mentioned before about the code switching, what is actually code switching though? When someone mixes languages in a conversation they're having, it's called code switching. In an introduction to social linguistics by Holmes and Wilson, we found that in Norway, people switch between their local dialect, Renamo, and the standard language, Bokmal, depending on the contexts. And some cases here in Indonesia, we can take an example from people in Jakarta saying, besok free class nih. Which is, kita bisa hang out ke GI dong. Or, hang out yuk. Mixing Indonesian with English together. It sounds so natural, isn't it? Especially among millennials and Gen Z who see English as cool and modern. And have you ever watched TV shows like In a Talk Show, Passbookers, Lapor Pak? You see the hosts mix regional languages and Indonesian to connect with the audience, right? Secondly, we have regional variations. We know that Indonesia is rich in its cultural diversity. It has hundreds of local languages and dialects. Okay, take an example from Norwegian of Renamo versus Bokmål. The Renamo is the local dialect and the Bokmål is the standard language. From the study by Elmis and Wilson, they're using Renamo with local ones while Bokmål was for outsiders. In Indonesia, a Japanese speaker might use kromo, a polite form of Japanese, with elders to show respect, but ngoko, informal Japanese, with friends. You know, it's all about the audience here, right? The third one is the style. People adjust how they talk based on the situation. And we're gonna take an example again from a study by Holmes and Wilson. Margaret was greeted with her boss with a goodbye, Margaret, but was greeted, hi, mom, with her daughter. Same case here in Indonesia. At work or school, someone might greet their leaders with selamat pagi, bu, selamat pagi, pak. But with friends, they're gonna use the informal way of speaking, such as, eh, pagi guys, balik duluan ya cuy. And you realize how it's about using the language to match the relationship and setting, right? Yep, that's correct. In Indonesia, Bahasa Indonesia is actually the high language for formal settings such as schools, business, and government, while regional languages like Javanese, Sundanese, Betawi Malay, etc., are for informal settings. The last one, we have the social factors. It related to participants, settings, and function. Based on Meyerhoff study, a boy, Ray, called his teacher Sid Bucket when speaking to his mom, but uses Mr. Sutton when speaking to the principal. In Indonesia, someone might use Papa for their dad at home, but called Bapa in public to show some respect. After learning about this whole language variation things, why it all matters, why it all matters to you, to us. Basically, it just because language variation isn't just about switching words, it's about identity, relationship, and also culture. So keep that in mind that language variation is not just about switching words. Okay?
Okay, now it's my turn to continue the material. I'll be talking two main things here. The first one is the application, and the second one is the theme in social linguistics. Let's start with the application. First, we have education. Social linguistics is incredibly useful in education, especially in teaching language. Think about it now. Students come from all kinds of backgrounds, and their experiment with language are often very different. By understanding how people use language in different social contexts, teachers can adjust their methods to better suit the needs of their students. This is especially important in school where multiple languages are spoken. It helps create an inclusive environment where everyone can learn more effectively. Second one, we have translation and interpretation. Have you ever thought about how much more there is to translation than just swapping one word for another? Social linguistics plays a big role here because it reminds us that language is tied to culture. In translation studies, social linguistics emphasize the importance of culture's context and social norms in achieving effective communication. Translators are encouraged to consider not only linguistic accuracy but also the social implication of their translation. Next, the third one is social media and communication. Social media is a huge part of our life, and social linguistics has something to say about that too. Digital communication platforms have given rise to new social linguistic research that focus on how language develop in online spaces. Think about how we use emojis or even create a new slang when we're chatting online. There's also a code switching, slang development, and the impact of social media on language practice. Now, let's move on to some key themes in social linguistics. First, we have language variation. Focuses on how language varies across social groups based on factors such as class, ethnicity, gender, age, and region. Take a look at the example. We have English. The way someone speaks English in the US is different from how someone spoke in UK or Australia. Each accent and variation reflects the culture and history of that region. It's like linguistic fingerprint. Next, we have language and identity. Examines how language reflects and shape individual and group identity because language is one of the most powerful tools used to express who we are. Individuals often express their identities through language choice, including the use of specific dialects or slangs that resonates with their social groups. For example, a person uses regional slang to indicate that he belongs to a particular community. Third one, we have language and power, studying how language can reinforce or challenge power dynamics and social hierarchy. Example, the use of formal or informal levels of speech in Japanese to show respect or authority. The last one we have language attitudes and ideologies. Language attitudes refers to the belief and feeling individuals hold about different language and or dialects. Certain language or dialects may be viewed as some more prestigious than the others. Attitude towards language can influence governmental language policy, including decisions about which language to promote in education or media. Example, in some countries, certain languages are promoted in schools or the media because they're seen as more important or modern, but these attitudes can also affect how people view their own language and identities.
Hi everyone! So in this part you are going to learn with me about how sociolinguists study language. So researchers use a variety of methods to understand how language works in society. There are three categories of these methodologies: quantitative methods, qualitative methods, and mixed of both. So we are going to learn step by step and understand how they are works. We are going to start with the first methods, quantitative methods. So these methods are all about collecting and analyzing numbers to uncover patterns in language use. Here how it works. First, surveys and questionnaires. So researchers create structured surveys to ask people about their language habits. For example, what language do you speak at home? Or what slang words do you use with friends? These surveys help researchers collect a lot of data quickly. Second one is statistical analysis. After collecting the data, researchers use statistical tools to find patterns. They might look for correlation like do younger people use more internet slang than the older generations, or are certain accents more common in urban areas than the rural ones? For example of these methods are a famous study in New York looked at how different social classes pronounce vowels. Researchers found that people's pronunciation often reflected their socioeconomic background. So quantitative methods give us the big picture, but they don't tell us the why behind the patterns. For that, we turn to qualitative methods. Qualitative methods is the methods that focus on the meanings and experiences behind how people use language. Here, how it works. First, they use ethnographic studies. This is when researchers immerse themselves in a community to observe how language is used naturally. They might spend weeks or even months listening to conversation, watching interaction, and taking notes. For example, in a bilingual neighborhood, researchers might notice people switching language depending on who they are talking to. This can reveal how language reflects identity and relationships. Second one, we have discourse analysis. This method focuses on studying conversation, speech, or written text to understand about how people use language to express power, identity, or even emotion. Let's take example. A researcher might analyze political speech to see how leaders use words to persuade or inspire their audiences. So qualitative methods give us deeper insight into why people speak the way they do and what their language choices mean in specific contexts. So now that we have covered patterns with numbers and stories with context, let's talk about combining the two of them for a more complete picture. So this method is called mixed methods, combining numbers and stories. Sometimes researchers use both quantitative and qualitative methods to get a well-rounded understanding of language. So quantitative part in this part is when surveys are used to gather the broad data, and the qualitative part is interviews or observations are conducted to add personal experience to the data. For example, imagine a researcher studying a heritage language that's disappearing. They might survey people to find out how many people still speak the language. Then they could interview older speakers to hear their stories and learn what the language means to them. So why it's powerful? So these methods combine the big picture from numbers with the personal touch from stories. So this is like creating a richer understanding. Finally, let's look at some modern techniques sociolinguists use to collect their data. So these called modern data collection techniques. In addition to traditional surveys and interviews, sociolinguists use innovative tools to study language in today's world. First, we have social media analysis. With platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, researchers have access to massive amounts of data about how people communicate online. For example, during the social movements, researchers might study hashtags to see how certain words or phrases spread across different communities. Second one, we have linguistic landscape research. So this involves studying public signs, advertisements, or even graffiti to understand how language are used in a specific area. For example, in a multicultural city, researchers might find that certain neighborhoods have shop signs in multiple languages. This reflects the diversity and cultural identity of the community. And that is how sociolinguists study language, whether it's numbers, stories, or a mix of both. These methods help us understand the rich and complex ways people use language. Next time, you notice someone speaking differently at work versus at home, or see signs in multiple languages in your city, remember, there is a whole science behind it.
Finally, here where we're going to talk about the application of social linguistics to Indonesian people. So, social linguistics in Indonesia provide a fascinating look into how language reflects on social norm, cultural shifts, and historical influences. Mostly, Indonesians create an informal language, or that we all know here as bahasa gaul, or can also be called as a slang as an alternative way to saying word in cooler way and not be seen as rigid, but can be understood by others in their daily conversations. People are saying words like gue instead of saya or aku in their daily conversations or text because they think the word saya or aku is way too formal to use in the conversation with their friends. This kind of social linguistics implementation was normalized and became a new culture or language used by most Indonesians. As you guys know, there are so many bahasa gaul in Indonesia such as bucin, gajeh, mager, gabut, and many more. This slang or bahasa gaul that most Indonesians, especially teenagers, use are created as a result of modification made with other languages or modified phrases and also replace or reverse letter in a word. This shows that teenagers may express themselves freely in their unique language. The growth of internet and social media, which have a big influence on how slang develops, is another indicator of the existence of slang or bahasa gaul.